never imagined that a single decision, one that seemed so innocent at the time, would change the course of my life. Forever I thought I had everything figured out, but I soon discovered that I'd been living in a comfort zone for far too long, unable to see the cracks beneath the surface. My name is Margaret, and at 68 years old, I thought I knew who I was, and I believed I had everything I needed. But the truth is, I was wrong. Mystery begins with Harold, my husband. Of 40 years, we were a typical couple, living quiet, predictable life in our charming home. He was a reliable man who worked in finance, a career that afforded us a comfortable lifestyle. We had built a life together, raised our children, and watched our grandchildren grow for years. We followed the same routine mornings filled with coffee and the newspaper, afternoons in the garden, evenings watching TV. It was simple, peaceful, and secure. I loved Harold, of course, but deep inside I couldn't help but feel that something was missing. I had always been a person of routine, never straying far from the known. I was content, or so I thought, but as the years passed, I found myself feeling restless, yearning for something more. Perhaps I needed to feel more alive, to experience something beyond my daily routine. I had been so wrapped up in taking care of everyone else, always fulfilling my role as the wife, mother, and grandmother, that I had forgotten to nurture the parts of me that had always been adventurous, curious, and full of life. I was afraid to admit it, but I was beginning to feel invisible. Not to Harold, but to myself. It all started when Robert, the new neighbor across the street, moved in. He was a breath of fresh air, confident, charming, and full of life. We began by exchanging pleasantries during casual conversations. As he moved in, at first it was nothing but neighborly chatter, but something about Robert intrigued me. He was different from Harold, spontaneous, energetic, and free-spirited. I found myself looking forward to our little chats, enjoying the way he made me laugh and feel noticed. One day he invited me for tea. I hesitated at first, thinking it was inappropriate for someone my age to be entertaining a younger man. But something in me pushed that thought aside. I told myself it was just a friendly gesture. So I went. The tea was warm, and our conversation flowed. Naturally, we talked about everything: books, music, travel, and the joys of life. Robert listened attentively, and I felt in a way that I hadn't felt in years. I realized that with Harold, our conversations had become mere exchanges about the day's events and nothing more. But with Robert, it felt like I was reconnecting with a part of myself that had been dormant for far too long. Over the next few weeks, our meetings became more frequent. We would have tea, take walks in the park, or sit on the porch, talking about life. The more time I spent with Robert, the more I began to feel alive again. He encouraged me to pursue my interest, to step outside of the boundaries I had built for myself. I felt a rush of excitement every time we met, something I hadn't experienced in years. But I was also conflicted. I was betraying Harold, the man who had always been by my side. But with Robert, I was rediscovering the woman I used to be. The woman who had dreams, desires, and a thirst for adventure. Then one day, everything changed. Harold had gone on a weekend trip with some friends, leaving me alone for a few days. It was the first time in years that I had been alone, without the constant presence of my husband. Robert had called and suggested we take a walk together. I agreed, and we walked through the park, talking and laughing, enjoying the moment. But as we walked, something shifted between us. The chemistry that had been building between us over the past few weeks came to a head. I found myself looking at Robert in a way I hadn't before. His presence was magnetic, and I couldn't deny the pull I felt toward him. By the time we reached the park bench, I was no longer thinking. Clearly, I was lost in the moment, consumed by the emotions Robert had awakened in me without thinking. I kissed him. It was quick, spontaneous, and intense. But when I pulled away, I realized what I'd done. I was in shock, and so was Robert. We stood there staring at each other, unsure of what to do. Next, I knew I'd crossed a line. I had been so focused on the excitement of the moment that I'd forgotten about the consequences. Didn't know what to do. but Robert, sensing my unease, took a step back. "Margaret, I never wanted to hurt you," he said quietly, "but I think you need to figure out what you want that night." Couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, my mind racing. What had I done? I had betrayed Harold, and for what a fleeting moment of excitement. But as the night wore on, began to realize that it wasn't just about Robert, it was about me. I had neglected my own needs, my own desires, for so long that I had forgotten what it meant to feel alive when Harold came home. He could sense the change. I tried to act normal, but he knew something was wrong. It didn't take long for him to ask me point blank what had happened. I couldn't lie. I told him everything, feeling a wave of guilt wash over me as I spoke. Harold listened quietly, his face expressionless when I was finished. He took a deep breath and said, "I don't know who you are anymore, Margaret. I can't keep living like this. Oh, us." And just like that, my world began to fall apart. Harold left, and within days we filed for divorce. Robert, too, seemed to fade away. The excitement of our secret meetings was gone, and I was left to face the aftermath of my actions. Months passed, and I found myself alone in a big house that had once felt full of life. I spent my days reflecting on what had happened, trying to make sense of it all. I had lost the man I loved, and for what? But as he sat there, I realized something important. I had spent so many years living for others. First for my parents, then for Harold, that I had forgotten to live for myself. This experience, as painful as it had been, had taught me a valuable lesson. It's never too late to discover who you are and to live the life you truly want. I began taking small steps to reclaim my life. I joined a painting class, started traveling on my own, and reconnected with old friends. It wasn't easy, and there were days when I doubted myself, but with each passing day, I felt stronger. I wasn't sure what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, I was excited about it now. So I sit here looking out the window at the sunset. I know that life is about choices. We all have the power to shape our own destinies, no matter how old we are. Yes, I made mistakes, but I'm not defined by them. I'm defined by the strength I've gained from